Welcome to Enjoy the Collective. I'm Marseille. Join my guests and I as we chop up the realities of the creative industry. I'm so glad you're here. So let's get into it. So on the couch today, I have Tia, a designer, Paul, who is a writer, illustrator, and art director. I feel like your own title makes you nervous.
Yeah, a little bit.
So today, I want to talk to you both about mentorship. I feel like we've all worked together in various ways.
Yeah.
And it's been a real blessing to my life. And I thought it would be good to kind of share that and chop up that conversation together. So my first question to you guys is, who or what introduced you to design?
I'll try to not say this out too quickly, but when I was thinking about this question, I thought about people who were influential in, the picture book industry when I started in the UK. And then I thought, well, if I go a bit further back than that, because there were people like Strawberry Donnelly and David McDougall, who are art directors who work today, and they would give me some really good advice. But when I was at school, when I was at university, I was making posters and doing design for theatres and different societies.
Wait, what did you study?
I studied English Lit and the Irish language, so humanities. But before that, in school, in primary school, national school, there was a teacher who was really into giving us a thorough art history education. So we were doing pop art, which to me is design, right?
Yeah.
But then I went back a bit further, and I think it was my mother, my mum. She had this really fastidious ledger, writing out all of the expenses and everything in this beautifully presented, handwritten thing, and that to me is high design. But even before that, she had this, when she was teaching us how to read, she had these cards with letters on, and I remember them so distinctly. They came in a cloth box, and they were all set in Helvetica, black on white, and it was they're just in my memory so vividly. And that's that's almost pure design. It's just the words, the form of the words on the simplest background. And we had a box of this stuff at home. So she's probably the person who she obviously had an appreciation of it. She didn't get some random stuff. She got a beautiful version of the thing. And maybe that's who it was. It was my mom.
Wow, that's fascinating. I had someone on before who was saying that, so they are a videographer and they work in the film industry, and their mum was the person who introduced them to what they ended up loving and becoming. And it's so crazy, the influence. And obviously a lot of it is subconscious as well. It's not your parents being this is design, Do you know what I mean? It's just something that you can see their appreciation of, and then you start to develop one yourself.
Yeah.
What would you say for yourself?
For me, I think it was a family friend who, she studied fashion design and then she took it up full-time after. And I think our age gap's maybe 20 years, so it's quite a bit.
Yeah.
But I just remember going to her house and just seeing her cut out these little panels, and it was just the attention to detail. It was just you've been in here for ages, and this is a half a skirt. And it was just seeing her love and her commitment, and then seeing the end product after, and just how stage by stage, it really fascinated me. And then I was
how old were you roughly?
I would have been I don't know, I think maybe 9. So I was it was quite young. And for me, especially in my family circle, it wasn't really many people doing anything creative. So, in my community, it was a no. You want to waste your life? Do you want to waste your life? Do you want to be poor?
Nigerian household, do you want to add that?
Oh yes, I'm from Nigerian household, just gonna put it out there. And so she was bold enough to just venture into that. And I think, I just found it so interesting. I never said anything, but I just was always watching her. And I think one thing that stood out to me was her commitment and her attention to detail. And everything she just did with such precision. And I was just this is
again,
cool.
This thing of being influenced, and it's being such a subtle thing. And I'm wondering for yourselves, now working in design, is the love that you originally saw the same thing, or do you love something different about it?
I think for me it's different, but I'm just thinking about what you just said, because having worked with you, what you described about this person's process, that's your approach to process. You are like, you're meticulous and you're so curious about the steps. You're like, why is that and what is that and is there another way to do it and is that the best way, and okay, I've got that now and can we just look at that, okay, and everything is like cemented and it kind of becomes a part of your design methodology or something or whatever framework. But that you have that in you. It's really interesting to hear you say that was an influence.
I'm so glad you said that because, having worked with you as well, like I do see that. I feel like you're so sharp. And that was like, so Paul and I have conversations about you.
Wow. When I'm not there?
All the time to you.
But one of the things that we both like, it's just like you're so sharp. Like you pick up things so quickly.
Yeah.
It's almost like a laser focus. Like you see it and you get it. And obviously in the environment that we've worked in, it's been quite fast-paced and there hasn't necessarily been the time to dedicate to the mentorship in the way that I guess Paul has with me. But you've kind of just like picked it up and gone with it and been like, your work is so clean. Like I review it and I'm like, okay, do I see it? No. Like it's generally like a sign-off thing.
Yeah, that's true. That's kind of one of the tricky things about like doing kind of mentoring or whatever word we're going to figure out to call it.
I don't know.
That when you work with someone and they're so good that you have to almost work a bit harder to find ways to help them become a stronger designer or do a bit more. It's a good problem, right? That you work with people that are like already sort of overachieving, I suppose, given the level of their experience, like Tia does.
Yeah.
Oh, guys, I'm grateful.
But the question about like, do I love something different? Yes, definitely. I think because I've been doing it a while now, like a good 15 years in children's publishing, which I never really expected to do. It's more about people now, and it's not always now about designing or moving the words and the pictures around to best effect. It's sometimes about moving the people around or moving the work around to the best effect.
I think you're really good at it because you actually put Tia and I in touch. Yeah. If you remember.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey. All right.
Yeah, I think you're naturally quite good at it. Is that in the art director space, or would you? Because
I think it is. Yeah. Like now for me, art direction. Like at the moment, I have one book. Like that, I keep one book going. Where I specifically art direct the illustrator, and my team does the rest. My team, I have two wonderful, wonderful designers, Lucy and Michelle, whose work is great, and I can trust them to work directly with the artists. But it's kind of it's almost like recruitment, where I'm speaking to people. Like I take a half an hour with someone and say, well, what do you want to do? This is what we do. Can we connect? And that could be an agent or an artist or someone at school or someone at uni or someone who's just graduated.
What about for you, Tia? Do you remember the question?
No. Sorry, I was so deep in Paul's question. I was like, what
was the question? Oh, so I was asking whether what you fell in love with design at the beginning, is that different now that you've been working in the industry?
Yeah, I would say that triggered my interest. And yeah, I guess in some ways it's become part of like my personal process. But I think what I love is just how it's just so much scope that what you can do within design. Like even listening to Paul, like say his transition from one thing to another, like now it's more people orientated, but before it was more like text and image. Or like for me, it's just like there's no bounds to how you can affect or impact people within design. And so for me currently, like I'm excited about the idea of seeing how you can put a message out there, but in a different way. And not necessarily because it needs to be different, but just because you can. And just because there is that much space and room within like the creative space to do something that someone else hasn't done. And that will appeal to some people and it won't appeal to some people, but you know what I mean? But at the same time, it's cool because you're reaching someone. So I like the fact that there's always something for someone in some way and capacity, and that just kind of excites me because then it makes me feel like there's more room for people to be accepted.
I think as well, it's like the thing about design, even when people don't realize that they have an appreciation for it, design is everywhere and you cannot escape it, and it is impacting you whether you are conscious of it or not. And people have a taste. Like you develop an aesthetic, you develop a taste, and that is coming from what you're being influenced by, and that's us.
Wow, I was expecting that.
It's really intense.
For sure.
So as designers, I was thinking about what you were saying, Paul, about, you know, working with people, and I'm wondering, as a designer now, how important is praise and correction? Because I feel like we all like the encouragement and the praise, but correction is very important for growing as a designer.
Yeah, it's an interesting word, isn't it? Correction. Yeah, I mean, they're super important, right? Because you can't grow otherwise. You can't, and it's. I think it's about a balance, really, between the two. Like, you know, it's almost like if you were an actor and someone came up to you after a show and they were like, "Oh my God, you were amazing! You were amazing!" I think if you're an actor, you don't really care. You probably think you're pretty good already. You want someone to go up and say, "You know, when you did that bit, and you were meant to be responding to that kind of whatever reaction, your reaction was meant to be this, it didn't quite come off, did it?" Yeah. And I think an actor would appreciate that a lot more. It's the same with kind of critiquing a designer's work. You're like, you have to deliver, you have to be frank, you have to say, you have to tell the truth, because if you skirt around it, then whatever they did that you don't think was in their best interest or was going to best serve their progression, they'll keep doing it until someone else tells them. And you have the opportunity to go, if you try this differently, are there questions you could ask about what you did here that will give you a different result? Maybe yes or maybe no, but there's probably a point where you ask questions, and I think that's delivering the correction.
It's to get them thinking in a problem-solving way. So it's if you're provoking question, then they have to look at it again and kind of critique it themselves.
Exactly, yeah. So you're sort of giving someone the tools to do what you've done because of your experience, then to allow them to do it themselves on their own work, like a writer rereading their stuff. The praise, yeah. I mean, we have this phrase in Ireland. My mum loves it. My mum's going to feature heavily in this. My mum loves this phrase. We have this phrase called and it goes "Mulanoiga agus tuchashiat," and what it means is, and it doesn't translate very well, but what it means is, praise the young, and they'll fulfil their potential. Like it kind of has a slightly different meaning in Irish, but we have to praise people's good work. Otherwise, they're not going to know they're doing good work. So it's essential, right? It's as essential as the correction or the criticism or the critique. But I think it's about having that good balance between the two, because too much of one thing is
they're not necessarily helpful.
Yeah.
That was deep. That was good, Paul. I think for me, I think honestly speaking, correction in some ways just feels better to hear than praise.
Okay.
And I think, but I feel like it all stems from how my creative journey started. For me, it was quite hostile. Like my mum wasn't really on board. You know, my family members weren't really on board. They're like, "Oh, are you sure?" And I was like, "Oh, I just want to give it you know." So I think I kind of ventured into it being like, I hope I'm not going to fall on my face. Yeah. So in that sense, it was more like when someone was giving me correction, I saw it as great, like one more thing to do to make me better. So in the back of my mind, I feel like sometimes that is always what I'm looking for. Like for someone to say, not in a rude way, like that's not what I'm looking for, but I think just an element of like, this can be done. And then I'm like, all right, cool. Oh, actually does look great. And then I feel like, oh, I'm progressing. Like I can actually feel like I'm progressing. Whereas I think if someone was just to be like, oh, this looks great, I would be like, thanks.
And now what?
I'm like, it feels nice like a minute, and then I'm like, okay, like I don't
want
know.
to be better.
Yeah.
So like, would you say, in your career now, how do your family feel about it now? Do they see like?
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry, Mum, bless her. She, you know, I hold nothing against you, Mum. I love you. She's gone on her own journey. I think she, her and some of the other ones, I guess, who are a bit more distant, just realised like, yeah, you're actually good at what you do, and I think just realising that it is a career and that there's a lot of opportunities. It's just, I guess, ones that they weren't familiar with, which is why I can't blame her, because she wasn't familiar with it. And I think her also seeing that I enjoy what I do. Also, I think my dad has always been, do what you love. You know? My dad's really chill, you know. But so in that sense,
they see it now.
I think they see it. I definitely think they see it.
Do they know what you do? Because I feel like even now, being in the industry for however long, I remember my dad was like talking to his friend. He's like, yeah, because, you know, my daughter, like, she draws. I don't draw. And I think because, you know, with book design, and you obviously in children's books you see characters, and I'm like, oh, I designed the book. I think in his mind that translates as I drew the characters on the cover. Yeah. So do you feel like people know what you do, like your family specifically understand what you do?
So many times you get it wrong. My dad, he was in a conversation. I think my uncle was like, oh yeah, so like, what does Tia do? And he was like, oh, she does imagination. I said, so what?
It's not wrong.
Imagination, drawing. I said, sorry. I was like, what is imagination, drawing? I think he meant to say illustration.
Oh, okay.
I honestly think people's description of what I do is actually the best part.
That's why you're in it.
That's why I'm in it, just for that, just for the confusion. I was telling another group before how when I started going to this church, I met like one of the older guys there. So to be fair, like he's an older guy. And he was like, oh, let me introduce you to people. He was like, oh yeah, this is Marseille, and she does shapes and colours. And I was like, to be fair, he's not wrong, right? But it doesn't sound very professional. It's just very like, what is that? Like, do you move shapes around? Which I do, technically. And I apply colour. But there's some type in there. There's like juxtaposition. There's design principles. Mm-hmm. All of that was missing. Okay, so we've spoken a bit quite about like the people in our lives and that their influence or their impact or understanding of what we do. And who would you say has been your biggest advocate, and what has their input or, I guess, their relationship to you meant?
Don't know. It depends on what you mean by advocate, I guess.
Well, I think the creative industry can be challenging, I guess, especially to kind of get into, and I think because there's a lot of it that you bring to what you're doing, you can get discouraged, or you can kind of feel like you're not good enough, and there's that struggle of you see amazing things, you want to create amazing things, but sometimes it gets lost in translation. You can't quite get there, and you need that push, that encouragement. So I guess advocate in that sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there was I think art directors are good at this. I think I've had a few art directors who were better at it than others. But I think it is about that push, isn't it? People who give you a push. But that can come from outside of the industry.
Yeah.
Like I've had it in Tanvi, my wife, is like amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean
she's
anyone.
I have a good friend Meg. She's almost like my guardian angel in the publishing industry. Although she doesn't work in the industry anymore, but she would be like, her motto is like, "Go for it, Kumi, go for it." Whenever something comes up, and she helped me to be like really pushy at the beginning about like sending my stuff out to people and just doing things on a complete whim, like, and just going, not on a whim, but like just sending people stuff and saying, "Do you have work for me?" Yeah. So those people like around me, as much as I would say like art directors who supported me have been like that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's almost like there isn't in terms of that advocacy, there isn't a split between like work people and life people. Yeah. If you're passionate about doing something, the people around you, if they're the right kind of people, they'll see it and they'll support you in that, and they'll sort of help you get out of your own way a bit in getting you where you want to get to next. Yeah. And I'd say that's still the case with my friends and with Tanvi as well, that I'm lucky to have that, like that they're like, "Are you sure you're doing the right thing now with this? Yeah. Or what could you be doing that would serve you better in getting to the next stage of whatever it is you're trying to figure out?" So yeah, I think it's been a broad range. Like generally, I think when you interview, because I've mostly had like salaried positions, when you interview, you'll get a sense at the interview whether these are the kind of people who will be that supportive for you in the role, because you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, right? Yeah, you kind of, because that's how we're sort of a little bit conditioned. Like you need the job, you need the job, you need the job. You don't always need the job, and the people are more important than the role. But yeah, that's something that I kind of learned to look out for after, getting it wrong. That I learned to look out for when I went for interviews was, are these people like, do they share my values? Are they on my wavelength? Or, will I potentially feel supported here? Do I feel supported now in the interview and like telling my life story to like total strangers and why I want to like spend time with them working and making or creating or designing? I think you get a sense of it in that room as well.
I agree. I would agree. What about for you?
Yeah, I think what Paul said as in like there's not really a clear divide between it being work and like personal, family and friends. For me, I think originally it definitely started with a family friend of mine and my dad, as I said, just being like, yeah, do what you love. Like, just so simple. It was almost so simple that I was like, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, really? Like, everyone else is like this and you're just like, yeah. And I'm like, but I think what it did was it made me feel like this element of freeness. Like, I was like, oh, okay, around these two people, I'm less tense. And if I am talking to them about the possibility of maybe emailing someone or doing something, they're like, yeah, what's the worst that can happen? My dad always says to me, like, the worst someone can say is no. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. So I think just simplifying issues or like being scared sometimes, going to them has been great, especially in the beginning. Going to them was just great, just to be like, okay, I'm just going to do it and see what happens.
And that's it. I'm just going to see what happens.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be the scary thing. So we've spoken about different types of people that have, I guess, been your advocate, whether it's been like your dad or your wife or your friends. What would you say makes, and I don't know what word to use because we're against the word mentor in a way.
It sounds a bit weird, doesn't it?
It does. It sounds very formalized. It sounds very intentional. And sometimes it's not that. Sometimes people just come alongside you and they give support or guidance. But for lack of a better word, what would you say makes a good mentor? What are the qualities of a good mentor? Or like,
I think
do you want to change the word?
I think Tia should answer
Wow,
this.
Yeah,
but you've been a mentor, so...
Yeah, I want a bit of a
he
praise
wants
and
something
correction.
praise and correction. Okay.
Okay, so I think, I was even thinking about the definition of mentor this morning, and when I looked at it, it said an experienced and trusted advisor. Well, one of the many definitions. And I just think, for me, that element of like trust comes in when you feel like someone's taken time and also patience, but at the same time, let me just relate it to me, is also honest about like what you need to do to get to like the next step or to progress in what or where you're at. Yeah. So interestingly enough, when I met Paul, and I was working with him a bit in the summer, I think the summer of 2018 actually.
Was it that long ago?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so, because we met
that year. Yeah. It would have been then. And I think it was so refreshing how like, if I did something, he would like have feedback for it, but be like, okay, cool, that's it. And like next, not the end of the world. And it was just like, oh, okay. So I can do something and not be right, but like he's not telling me off. But at the same time, he's like, I could tell that he was listening to why I'd done what I'd done, but also explaining like what I needed to do next. Yeah. And then that created that element of like, so he's patient. And then that made me feel confident to then, if I do make a mistake, it's okay, he'll tell me what to do and then I can fix it. So it was like patience, trust, respect, but honesty, like all in a combination, made me then feel like I can do it. Like I can try it, and even if it's not perfect, there's room to be corrected and then to do better. I
think that's really key, like for designers or creatives, or maybe anyone to be honest, like a space where you can get it wrong. When you're in an environment where you feel like you can't make mistakes, you almost can't create good work because all you're trying to do is appease the person rather than either problem solve or create in a way. But I think that's really key.
Yeah, I mean that environment where you can't make mistakes, we've all been there at school. School is it, like unless you were lucky enough to have some good teachers, most of school is you're expected to know, but there's not a lot of energy going into helping you learn because of all the pressures on teachers and the whole system isn't designed for that kind of patient our patience with people who don't know what they're doing yet, and that's what it is. I think it's just that's really nice, that idea of patience. I think that is a part of it. It's like you go in. I think to be that person who's going to be. Yes, I don't like the word mentor, but you are kind of like you come into someone's like life for a bit, and you're there, and they can rely on you for help, and guidance, and sort of tech support almost sometimes. But there is that like going into it with an expectation that this person isn't going to know everything, and there's something you have to give. But you can do that with or loads of different relationships as well. Yeah. But this is specific to design or to whatever industry you're in. Yeah. You can, the patience is probably up there. Yeah. Quite high up there, which is good for me because I'm naturally an impatient person. So
really?
I always want to get stuff done.
I was shocked.
Yeah, I always want to get stuff done. Like get it done, move on to the next thing. I'm working on it. I've been working on it for a long time. but like when I'm in a situation like that, that forces me to be really present and really patient and just wait and listen and then watch and sort of interrupt where necessary and things like that.
I think you're uber patient. I know that there's things that you've taught me that like years later I've come back and I'm like, yeah, Paul, that thing that you showed me, how did I do that again? Like I just don't remember. So yeah, I think you've been very patient and I'm very thankful for your input because
it's been a pleasure. Like
navigating publishing like without you would have been a minefield for sure.
Yeah, it's a funny old industry. Like it's really old.
Yeah.
It's like I would say really old. It goes back to like Gutenberg, like the printing press in like Western society terms. It's like that old, that industry. It's all about like turning paper into money, and it hasn't evolved much. It's still about turning paper and words into money.
Yeah.
So
but
it has
just
a lot
even like the approach to design, I think. I don't know if I can say this on camera, but I feel like it lacks innovation in some ways. I feel like there's a way that publishing like for books to look and should be, and there is merit to that. There's good reason for a lot of things, but there's so much, like design has evolved so much, and I just feel like we're not that interested in, well, I say we, the industry is not that interested in innovation.
No, it's I would agree.
I don't know if that's a fair. I haven't been in it that long.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say it's very I suppose we in the industry sometimes called market led. It's very trend driven. Something will do well, and then a lot of certain publishers will try to emulate that success by doing something that's similar to the thing that was successful, which is essentially the opposite of innovation, right? It's the other way around. The truth about like things that do well is that nobody did them ever. Someone does it, it does really well. That's really how success, that's how a hit appears, Someone thinks of a book or an idea that's doing something, a specific thing that no other book has done before. The same about movies as well. But the industry, like you said, absolutely, like you nailed it, doesn't operate like that. They don't think about the customer really and the customer's need for something new, which is every customer. They think more about what are called gatekeepers, where it's like the bookshop, book buyer, Sainsbury's book buyer. Librarians in the US have a huge influence. You're making books for librarians, you're not making books for readers. So there's this point where there's an authority on how books should be, and that's as far as the publishers will go. And I mean, it's down to platforms like Unbound and people who kickstart their own books and people who self-publish to bring the innovation. But the industry will only respond. It doesn't sort of do a new thing because it's hard to make money. Books are very cheap.
No, I get that. And the cost of paper going up is
it, the cost of paper. And so there's a lot of risk aversion, like a reluctance to do something totally different that people don't understand, because people want novelty, but they want it packaged in a way that they understand. It's like
what they're familiar with.
That's it. Yeah, they need to be familiar with it. Otherwise they don't. There's a fear that they won't get it, and then suddenly something comes along. And people go, oh my God, this is like the best thing ever. And then everybody copies it.
Okay, final question. I wonder, we've spoken a lot about the people in our lives, their input and their impact. And I wonder if there's a piece of advice you've received from anyone that has really stuck with you, that you kind of like go back to and like almost like live by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember who told me, but I don't remember. But it is like, if, in terms of that's because I didn't really know about how to answer this question. But now that you said like that, you go back to it, it's that there's no such thing as a stupid question. So every question you ask has validity because the questions come up in you, and other people, and it's because you touched on it a while ago about like, or you said it about other people's expectations. The question is yours. The idea that people ask stupid questions is a real like judgment call from like this kind of somewhere out there, but there aren't really. And if you have a question, you have to give a voice. Sounds a bit odd, but you have to ask it. Otherwise, you're letting yourself down. So now I always ask the question, even if I feel like I'm in a situation where I should know. I'll ask it, and often in that situation, I'm not the only one who had the question. Because people have a little bit of a fear, and I have it, I willingly admit it, of asking a question that I feel like I should know the answer to, and there might be a bit of a judgment afterwards, a bit of reaction.
Oh, you don't know that?
I don't know. Like, but that's it. But so I check myself now, and I go like, well, I need to know, and the need to know overrides the fear of being perceived as stupid, or the question being perceived as stupid, rather. So yeah,
that is the fear, the underlying fear, though, that you are perceived as stupid.
Absolutely. Yeah. The stupid is the questioner as well as the question. Yeah. But the truth is there are no stupid questions. There are only like opportunities missed for not asking a question. Because you might not get a chance to ask it again.
I think it's that as well. It's like seizing that opportunity. Yeah.
That's true. For me, I think one of the things I heard recently. Oh yes, from Marseille. Sorry, I just realised I was like, yeah, it's for me actually.
I'm curious to see what it is now.
Yeah, it was very simple, but it's been going on in the back of my mind, I think, and it's like, what do you want to get out of this also? And I think for me, the reason it's so important is because naturally I can be like this, right? I'm given a task and I'm like, okay, and I can get so involved in the task or who I'm doing it for, and forget that there's always an opportunity to get something out of it for me, or there's that space for me to think, okay, what could I also get out of this? Yes, I'm going to deliver something and to a good standard and for somebody else, and hopefully meet their expectation, but also what am I hoping for to get out of this? And I think the nice thing about that is the more I think about that, the more like even more fulfilling it feels after. Like I thought the most fulfilling thing is actually getting it done and delivering it to a standard where the person's happy. Completely not even thinking about what am I thinking. I'm like, they're thinking great, so that must mean like, yeah. So then when I put myself in the equation, I was like, whoa, this is deep. And I still don't fully know like exactly, but just that question has brought like opened a whole new area in my mind of like, okay, what is it that you want out of this? So it's quite exciting, scary, but exciting.
Yeah, because I think like what we do is in service to like a thing, a person, a company or whatever, and you are bringing a part of yourself to it. It's your taste, your influence, your approach, whatever the case may be. And yeah, like, you know, we want to be selfless people, but we also want to be present in what we're doing. And I think it is helpful to think about like, you know, what can I get out of this? And also to try and think, because I'm like you, like when I'm working on something, it's like laser focus, like narrowing, but then you kind of miss everything else around.
Yeah.
And oh gosh, I can't remember the quote, but there's like a quote in The Alchemist where has anyone read that? There's like they have the spoon, something on the spoon, like oil or something. And I think he's given the spoon and he tells him to like basically walk to one room to another and not spill the oil. So he's like looking at the spoon, walking. And when he gets to the other room, I think they ask like, did you notice like the artwork on the walls? Did you see the painting? It's like, no, like I was focused on not spilling the oil. And then even in that, there was like that kind of lesson. Can't remember like specifically what it was, that how they explained it. But it's like, you know, that being focused and you know, doing that task, but not forgetting like to lift your head up and like kind of, I've really butchered that, I'm sure. And I'm sorry to Paulo Coelho.
I think it's really clear. It's such an important thing that you don't like overdo it when you're trying to get better, and that you have that room for like looking around. Yeah.
Just exploration. Thank you guys.
Thank you
so much. I'm really thankful for just your input and just your openness and traveling very far for both of you to come in today. So thank you so much.
Sure.
It's fun.
Yeah.
A big thank you to my guests and Renaissance Studios for allowing us to use this amazing space. If you liked the episode, then comment, like, and subscribe, and we will see